How does pain hit you? And I mean that. I mean, hit you, of course. How does pain affect your life? Guys, I'm Coach Ken up here in Anchorage, Alaska, one part of Healthy Together and Feeling Great. But I want you to think about this. How is pain impacting your life? And how does insulin resistance impact that? Maybe you haven't even thought about it. Of course, because insulin just has to do with diabetes, right? Only it doesn't. It's one of the major hormones of our body that affects so many different things, including pain. So today we're going to hear from Dr. Stephen Brown, who is an anesthesiologist and somebody that knows a lot about pain because he has to manage it. He has to care for people. He's a professor as well as a practicing physician, and he knows quite a bit about the subject. So I'm going to let Dr. Stephen Brown talk to us a little bit about the impact of insulin resistance and its impact on chronic pain that you and I might be facing, or if not you, then somebody who you know and you care about. So let me switch things over a little bit, and we're going to hear now from Dr. Stephen Brown.
Anesthesiologist, as Trent mentioned, I live in Toronto, and I'm an assistant professor at the University of Toronto. And at the Toronto Metropolitan University as well.
Hold on, give me a second. We had, looks like we had a little flub right there. Let's switch this up again. I don't know why it did that. My apologies. I usually have all of this set up and ready to go. There we go. All right, let's do it now. Give me just a second. And here we go.
And did we get the right view there, Trent?
This view is perfect. I would just go forward with this. We can see the screen pretty well.
Excellent. So that's me. I'm a chronic pain specialist as well. And anesthesia, as most of you know, work in the operating room and work on labor and delivery, doing epidurals and getting you off to sleep for your operations. But pain management is an important part of what anesthesiologists do. And that's me. I want to talk about insulin resistance today and how it's relevant to pain. Acute and chronic pain. And just tell you briefly my story. At age 52, a couple of years ago, I realized that was insulin resistant in retrospect. I was about 25 pounds overweight. My triglycerides were high. I had psoriasis. And I was on a blood pressure medication. None of these things sat well. I heard about the program from an endocrinologist in Toronto. Some of you may know her as Dr. Midge. I refer to her as my wife. Well, also Dr. Midge as well. But together we went on a journey on this product, and our results have been incredible. I'm off my blood pressure medication. My skin is completely cleared up. My triglycerides are normalized, and I've lost 25 pounds and kept it off. It's been the easiest thing that we've ever done. And we decided to dive in, not just to learn about it for our own health, but professionally. How's this going to apply to what I do on a daily basis, not only in the operating room, but in terms of pain management as well. So that's our story. So let's start with a definition quickly. Insulin is a hormone secreted by the pancreas. Most of you know that functions at the cellular level by binding to insulin receptors, basically making glucose go into cells. Insulin is a hormone that responds to blood sugar levels, and normalizes them. It has hundreds of other functions, though, and I don't want to oversimplify insulin's role in the body. It affects every cell in our body, and therefore every organ. And so when you have problems with insulin, you have problems all over the place. How do we get insulin resistance? Well, one of the ways we get insulin resistance is having chronically elevated levels of insulin, or hyperinsulinemia. And how do we get that? We get that by eating too often and eating the wrong foods, as illustrated in this diagram. Typically, 70% of the carbs consumed worldwide, the food rather, consumed worldwide, 70% is carbs. So we're eating a lot of sugar, getting a lot of sugar, and we're eating it frequently. We're eating fiber-depleted foods and ultra-processed foods at the same time, and we're eating frequently. Your insulin responds to these frequent sugar challenges. and remains high as outlined in the red line. Chronically elevated insulin leads to insulin resistance. And it leads to all of these problems. There are so many different organs and cells in the body that are affected by this syndrome. Type 2 diabetes is the endpoint of insulin resistance. Stroke, heart disease, obesity, migraines. Insulin resistance of the brain is dementia and Alzheimer's. Insulin resistance of the ovaries is polycystic ovaries. These lead to disease states such as heart disease, diabetes, stroke, Alzheimer's, cancer, depression, and pain. 93% of are estimated to be unhealthy. This is a very common problem, as Trent outlined in his video. And, I see this in the operating room as well. And it's not exactly 93, but it's pretty close to 93% of the people that end up in the operating room are overweight. They're on a statin for cholesterol. They're on an oral hypoglycemic to control their blood sugar. They're on a blood pressure pill. They're often on Ozempic. It's a system, society-wide problem, and I see it every day in the operating room. And again, this got me to thinking, well, now that I know so much more about insulin resistance, what are its implications not only for the health of people coming to the operating room, but how does it pertain to pain? And that's what we're going to talk about. So a definition, first of all, pain is both an unpleasant physical and emotional sensation. The two are inseparable. Pain is your own unique interpretation of risk assessment of the outside world. And I'm going to go through different stages of pain processing, pain physiology in just a second. But I've highlighted that because people think it's a physical experience only, and it's not. And people who have acute pain and chronic pain, I think, will agree. So here's some really basic steps of pain perception. First of all, there's information that's triggered. There's a stimulus of some kind. In this particular diagram, it's a large knife, but it doesn't have to be a large knife. There's a stimulus, whether it's some sort of tissue injury, tissue stimulation. It then gets transmitted. That information gets transmitted to number 3 and 4, to the brain, where it's perceived and modulated. So signal generation, there's some sort of stimulus, transmission through the peripheral nervous system to the brain.
Dr. Steve, we might be getting a little bit of interference on your camera. It looks like you're frozen. Anybody else frozen? Am I frozen? Maybe I'm the frozen one. Okay, so Dr. Brown is frozen. We'll give him a second. And hopefully he regains his signal. Thank you in the chat for letting me know that he's the frozen one.
Yeah, it looks like we've got a problem here with our broadcast.
While we're waiting for Dr. Brown to come back, which
let me see. Let me see if I can get. Oh, here we go. I think he's going to pick back up. Give me a second. All right. Let's see if we can get him back on. Does pick back up. Okay, here we go.
Okay, I put it to the beginning. So I think I was talking about the basics of pain physiology and pain sort of sensation and pain transmission. So let me just get slides back up here, and I do apologize for that.
Hey, no stress whatsoever. We are grateful you're here.
But it was my fault. That's what I'm going to say. So we talked about how common this is. Insulin, pain is unpleasant physical and emotional sensation. Talked about stimuli, creating a stimulus, creating a message, getting that message to the brain where it's perceived and modulated. Here's the detailed diagram of that, by the way, just to show you how much I simplified it for you. Trent, there's going to be a test on this for everybody, right? You want me to leave it up here a little bit longer? Good. So what are the main themes here? So we talked about them. So at the cellular level, at the tissue level, there's inflammation. and cell damage directly related to insulin resistance. So these are the three main things. So insulin resistance affecting tissues directly, creating that signal, that warning sign, that signal that goes through the nervous system. The second phase, which we talked about, is getting that signal to the brain. And I'm going to just tell you briefly how insulin resistance changes the way the nervous system works. So it affects not only the creation of stimuli, creation of cell damage, it affects how it's transmitted to the brain. And when it gets to the brain, insulin resistance causes altered central processing, an alternate interpretation of that pain once it gets to your brain. So let's go into more detail quickly. The tissue, we mentioned inflammation, commonly seen and very commonly seen, in fact, frequently seen with insulin resistance. Glycation is another source of cell damage, often associated with high sugar levels. Oxidative stress, it's kind of like the body isn't cleaning up its garbage quite as well. There's a lot of free radicals around these damaged cells. And if you think about insulin resistance and its relationship with obesity, there's increased mechanical load on things like joints, muscles. All of these factors cause actual cell damage. They damage the endothelial lining, which is the thin lining of the arteries that supply your heart, your brain. Therefore, cardiac disease, stroke, supply all your other tissues. Endothelial damage, cartilage is dependent on insulin, proper insulin functioning to stay healthy, as is synovium, the very thin layer of and fluid that coats a lot of cells, like our knees and our hips. Insulin resistance has direct impact on muscle functioning, muscle cell functioning. So we've got insulin resistant relevant at the very tissue level of the body. So how's it relevant? How's insulin resistance relevant to transmission? Well, inflammation can be localized, but it's also widespread. There's circulating sort of chemicals, the results of inflammation, that increase the sensitivity of our nervous system. So signals are transmitted more easily and with more intensity. This, combined with poor blood flow and the other cellular impacts that I just talked about, results in direct nerve tissue damage. So the actual nerves themselves are damaged and have an impaired transmitting ability. This can lead to neuropathic pain, which is very common in insulin resistance, not just with diabetes, which is the common thing that we know. This can lead to itchiness, crawling sensation, pins and needles, electric shooting. These may sound familiar to some of you. So we talked about the tissue impact of insulin resistance, the transmission implications. And what about when it gets to the brain? Well, this is where information, it's not pain yet. It's just information. This is where information is filtered through our genetic composition, prior learning or pain history, social cultural factors, or psychological status. And this is the big one, the central processing of pain. It depends. It depends on how we feel. It depends on what we've seen before. It depends on how we assess this threat that the information is presenting. So insulin resistance affects all three levels of the nervous system, as I've outlined. So pain becomes chronic after 3 to 6 months. And who goes on to develop chronic pain? Well, there are several risks. Stressful life events, chronic stress, sleep disturbances, physical inactivity, obesity, depression, anxiety, emotional trauma, injury, intimate partner violence, political persecution, any traumatic life event, genetic predisposition, a family history of a similar syndrome, advanced age, and poor coping or passive coping strategies called catastrophizing. So you can see that the information, when it comes into the head, is modulated by all sorts of historical experience-based factors, and a lot depends on mental health. A chronic pain syndrome that we heard about earlier is fibromyalgia. This is incredibly common, and it is traditionally and historically underdiagnosed, undertreated, and really underappreciated and misunderstood by the physician, the medical population. It's characterized by widespread musculoskeletal pain. We heard Tanya's description. This pretty much sums up what she said. Fatigue, cognitive dysfunction, psychiatric disturbances. You feel like a big bruise, I think was what the word she used. And I think that's an excellent description. It's expensive. It's billions of dollars a year in treatment and in lost productivity. What is fascinating to me and what I've learned as I dove into this topic is that individuals with fibromyalgia have higher incidence of insulin resistance. It's strong correlation. And the degree of insulin resistance, i.e., how bad your insulin resistance is, correlates with the severity of fibromyalgia symptoms. This was absolutely fascinating to me. This is not well known, and I'm glad to be able to have this discussion with you tonight because I think it's relevant to the treatment of all sorts of chronic pain, but specifically fibromyalgia. There's big opportunities here for new understanding and possibly new ways of managing this chronic, very, very, again, historically under-recognized, underappreciated transition. And, fibromyalgia over the years has got a bit of a bad name because it's been hard to explain, and therefore the phrase, "it's all in your head," has been thrown around by medical professionals worldwide for years. And I'd like to sort of wrap it all up, Trent, with one more slide. And this talks about, it's an analogy to talk about acute pain versus chronic pain, what our historical understanding and what my current understanding is. So you think of this stove, and there's a fire on the stove. That's a stimulus. That's a danger. And you get nervous tissue sending signals. Something's going on. Send the signals to the brain. Smoke alarm. Smoke alarm goes off. This is an appropriate mechanism. This reduces risk. This means I'm going to go and put out the fire because that alarm's gone. In your typical acute pain, I'm going to go put the fire out. The alarm will stop. Done. Finished. It's a protective mechanism. Pain. In the chronic pain situation, again, historically, the fire goes on. The alarm goes off. We go and put out the fire, presumably, but the alarm keeps ringing. The alarm keeps going off. And so people historically have tried to put out the fire. They tried to fix the stove. They tried to figure out why that alarm is still going off. And they've traditionally not focused or not appropriately treated the source of that alarm bell, which is some of those risk factors I talked about, some of the learned behaviors, some of the mental health issues. And so we put, I think, historically too much focus on that alarm. And so when I look at insulin resistance and my sort of new understanding of this is that insulin resistance is not only affects the source of the fire, i.e. creates the fire, not only does it make your alarm bell go off, but it does both. And I think with fibromyalgia, a lot of other chronic pain conditions, we've just assumed it's just the alarm, it's just the psychological piece. But insulin resistance, there's still a fire burning. And I think that's what I'd like to impart today and to any chronic pain physicians or other physicians listening, is that it's not all in people's heads, chronic pain, but insulin resistance does affect how we process it centrally. But there's still things going on in the periphery. There's still a fire that we need to address. And by managing insulin resistance, hopefully we can put out the fire and help the alarm as well.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Sorry about the little blurb in the midst of that. And thank y'all for being here. I know some folks that have come on this. I do have Coach Ken in the AM will be starting here shortly. As this is part of what I do to provide some education. Some things belong beyond just what I know. I'm learning too. So I'm really thankful that folks have been here. I see Sylvia's in here, Dracul and Canadian Cat, some of my good friends that are on my Coach Ken in the AM. But this is part of my continuing education I want to share with you, is this learning about insulin resistance as a nutrition coach, trying to help people. Coach Ken the AM, welcome in those of y'all here. We're coming to the end of this live. So I'll be available to talk more about this if you would like to know more about insulin resistance and the solutions to that. One of the things that Dr. Brown talked about is the Feel Great system, something that Dr. G and I use as well, just like Dr. Brown talked about him and his wife, endocrinologist Dr. Midge Brown. and how the Feel Great system helps to address these issues of insulin resistance in our lives in a way that is unlike anything else, and helps on the cellular level to help heal the body, and to reverse insulin resistance and to keep us on that path. So if it's something you'd like to know more about, I have a whole video about that, my own review of that. I've got the long-term form video and some other videos on the subject. So thank you for being here. If you do have interest, make sure that you contact me. All the information is here. Put in the comments down below. Just type in feel great. If you want to feel great, if you want to start on this product, if you want to learn more about it, type feel great in the comments, and let's get you started on a path to health and wholeness. And here at Healthy Together, that's what we want to help you with. I'm going to be getting off on this one, but make sure if you haven't subscribed, do that. Coach Ken in the AM is going to begin shortly over here, right here on the same channel. So stick around and pay attention, and we'll see you right back here on the flip side.